From a small shop to a retail giant, from a backyard garage to a global automaker. Many family-owned businesses across the world have become household names and modern-day legends. But how crucial is their contribution to global business? That's the question I asked Professor John Davis, Senior Faculty at Harvard Business School and a globally renowned expert on family-owned businesses.
You know, family companies are the biggest sector in any economy. Now in India it's even bigger than on average, but on average about 2/3 of all of the companies in the world, let's say, are family businesses. Half of all the publicly listed companies in the US are family controlled. 2/3 of all the listed companies in India are family controlled. About 2/3, maybe 60–70% of all the companies in the US are family business, 80% in India. But it's worldwide. You will not save maybe North Korea, you know. You will not find any country around that isn't dominated by family business.
What is interesting about the research that you've done, Professor, is that you believe that a lot of the family-owned businesses actually do well and they stand the test of time in terms of performance, especially in tough times. Why is it?
As a matter of fact, what we know that on average, family companies do better. It is arguably a superior form of capitalism. Now, there are high performers and low performers, but there are high performers and low performers in any other kind of company too. It's just that on average, family companies outperform these other non-family forms of capitalism. Why is it? It's their long-term perspective, their long-term investing, the loyalty base to customers, suppliers, employees, the fact that there is a strong persistence. You know, businesses face all kinds of challenges, and families by their nature tend to persist through challenges. And I could go on, but those are major factors that lead family companies to perform better.
You know, in tough times, most companies and analysts say that, you know, corporates have a very short-term vision.
Right.
Is there something to learn from family-owned businesses? If you're talking about the persistent aspect of it and the fact that they're constantly looking at how to keep the business alive for not the next quarter or this slowdown, but really for 20–30 years.
You know, I laugh sometimes that family companies will say, I just want to run my business like a public company. And I think, why on earth would you ever say that? Don't do that. Don't run your business like a public company. These short-term, speculative, bottom-line driven companies, don't do that. Run your business like a well-run family business because you actually have a superior model of performance because of all of the factors we've talked about. And I'm looking forward to the day when public companies say, I would just like to run my business like a family business. And they should. And I think that if public companies can start modeling the characteristics of family companies, I think they'll do better. I'll give you an example of that. General Electric, actually a very high performing company, actually has several characteristics of a family business. Long-term perspective, pretty stable ownership, public but pretty stable ownership. They grow talent from within. There's a family orientation inside that organization. And they also have they're very quality oriented, like the high performing family companies. The basic fundamental drivers of family business success are those that can be copied by other forms of business, and they should.
Let me give you the counter argument to that. The counter argument is that family-owned businesses did well when economies were paced properly. There was a logical line of sight. Today, there is a lot of volatility.
Right.
You necessarily have to look at outside sources for capital, for partnerships. And because of the opaqueness of family-owned businesses,
right,
they aren't actually getting access to real capital, growth capital, and hence, over a period of time, we'll see most of them fail?
Well, over a short period of time, you're going to see most companies fail. And the truth is that family companies live about twice as long on average as other forms of enterprise. But you're mentioning a very good point. One of the vulnerabilities of family business is it's not just their concern about control. I tell families that, I used to think that they were concerned about control, but that's wrong. They're obsessed with control and control of decision making and control of their ownership. And you're absolutely right that one of the needs in a business to survive, especially in a quick moving economy, is to be able to scale at a pace that is appropriate for the opportunity that they're facing. And if they don't do it, someone else will do it. And family companies need to get better at bringing in outside capital, forming JVs, bringing in private equity money, finding other kinds of investment, and structuring their ownership so that they can maintain control, for example, at the very top, but within their operating businesses, get the infusion of capital that they need. You're exactly right. And this is something that I'm watching.
Are the stakes higher right now in the current volatility, and is it getting tougher for family-owned businesses? Because you speak to so many of them.
Yeah, there's no question. The game is getting harder for everybody, including family companies. Now, I argue that the long-term perspective, the persistence, the willingness of families to, manage through volatility and disruption, it works in their favor. But they need to be nimble. They need to be able to move into opportunities faster. And many family companies, the best ones, they have the decisiveness and the know-how. They may need some more capital, but they have many of the factors they need to adjust quickly. When family companies get older, the ownership group spreads. If they don't have decisive governance set up, now they become vulnerable. And you'll see more of those companies probably biting the dust because they can't keep up. But a good portion of the family business world is built to adjust.
Up next, we find out how a company that started with two brothers making slippers has grown over almost 2 centuries to become one of the world's largest shoe companies. It's very important to grow as a family in your outlook as you grow your business.
Yep.
My question to you is that the biggest challenge many Indian family-owned businesses face at different stages of their evolution is really getting the professionals in, professionalizing the business, making sure that they get good talent. How big is that a problem, and what are the ways in which companies are dealing with it?
Being able to attract and retain great talent is, again, it's a necessary component for performance in all kinds of companies. It is one of the vulnerabilities of family business, because if the top spots in a business are already taken by family, you might become a good training ground to grow managers, but some of the good ones are going to leave. So you need to be able to leave some of the top leadership positions in companies open, at the very least, for aspiring non-family executives to bring in that talent and get them to change or to grow within the company. But you also need to be able to know when the family is no longer able to lead the operations of the business and finally make an appointment of a non-family executive as the business leader. So family companies, with the turbulence that now exists in many industries, with the opportunities that some companies face in growing and becoming better, families are getting on board with professionalizing their business at a better pace, not waiting until they're in trouble, to change their leadership or to change the way they do things.
You know, professionalizing is one thing, and I think it's a very valid point that you need to keep empty slots at the top so that people can see visibility of growth. But giving up control is a big issue.
Yeah.
You've done a case study with the Stevenson Steel Company where the family wanted to grow rapidly and hence got a CEO in with the mandate to be aggressive.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite work out.
Right.
Take us through the case and what you thought was the problem there.
Well, the Stevenson Industries case that I wrote at Harvard, which is actually a disguised name, looks at an old four-generation family company that starts to stall out. There are growth opportunities in the industry, but they're not able to grow. Things have become stodgy. They're essentially leaderless. And they've started losing talent. They've started losing customers. And the board's solution to this is to bring in a hard-charging, enterprising, non-family CEO. It's a disaster. And culturally, the new CEO does what he promises the family that he will do, but he upsets the culture so much that eventually he's thrown out. Ironically, what happens in that situation is that one of the board members loyal to the family becomes the new CEO, does essentially what the fired CEO was going to do, but now with the support of the family. Because what they realized in this situation is they needed to get the family aligned with the needs of the company and supportive of change. And that's what the chairman of the family company now does with this new CEO. It works brilliantly. They're able to grow the company successfully and eventually sell it at a very good premium to one of their large industry competitors.
What is the learning in this? Is it that you can't really get an outsider to come and build on a company with a different ethos? And should you be then making sure that along with the family that you're nurturing, you also nurture a management cadre which can take bigger responsibilities over a period of time?
You know, I think there are a couple lessons. One is that you can't really make sustained large change in a family business without aligning the family and getting the family to understand the needs of the company and to take a more professional attitude about that business. Any effort that I've seen where the family's left out of the equation and you're not actively working to get their alignment and support of the change, doesn't work. So that's number one. The second is that you have no real option today but to get ready for change. And the family has to come to terms always with what is our highest and best use. Are we able to still manage and lead this company operationally? Or are we better suited on the board in ownership as ambassadors for the company? But we've got to figure out how we add value as a family. And then we better get organized to deliver that value. So family company professionalization always involves, I mean always involves, professionalizing the family.
Clark's is another case study that you have worked on, which is
Right.
a very different outcome to a similar problem, in the sense of the family facing a business challenge and not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, you know, in the Clark's a very famous shoe company that's existed for a couple of centuries in England and has sold, you know, shoes all over the world under its brand. In the 80s and 90s was really faltering because their English factories could no longer cost-effectively or quality-wise keep up with the manufacturing of the shoes they were then selling. And everybody was eating their lunch. And it took them a while just to figure out what was right in front of them, that their manufacturing system itself was outdated, couldn't be restored, and they needed to have a much different approach to manufacturing their shoes. nobody in the family could really turn this company around, so the family chairman, a man named Roger Petter, brought in an outside CEO who did a fabulous job, all the right things in terms of restoring good business health to this company. And it's grown. He was able to recharge the company and get it growing again, and it's been growing very, very well. But that could only happen because Roger Petter, again, aligned the family around the need for growth.
What are the lessons to be learned from a homegrown grocery store in Arkansas, USA, which became the world's largest retailer? Find out when we return. I often hear family-owned business patriarchs talking about the need for professionalizing the company. I think there is an understanding that to grow you need to get talent. Yeah. But what are the stumbling blocks to get the talent? Because at different stages of the company you need talent. So let me break it down. When should professionalization as a process start? And how can a promoter make sure that he does it right?
Professionalization has to do with more than bringing in new, better talent. It's often seen that way, but it's a much broader concept. What it always refers to is getting better at our game and using industry standard practices, to manage this thing. And families themselves can often become better and still support the growing needs of their company. We don't need to get rid of the family in order to professionalize, although you can't professionalize without upgrading your talent, family and non-family. Okay? So professionalizing involves changing organizational practices, changing management systems, often upgrading people or finding new people, but it doesn't necessarily mean kicking out the family, but rather, again, finding the right role for the family. Now, what are the impediments to doing that? Families can become so traditional-minded, that they're tradition-minded, that they start thinking, our business involves making this thing in this way here. And that's not the right attitude about business at all. I think if families really understood, our goal as a family is to offer value to customers and build the right kind of culture and grow the reputation of what we're doing, how we do it needs to change. What exactly we do could change. Very often over generations, good families, good businesses will migrate from one product line into another or extend across a few different product lines to get the growth that they need. So being too stodgy and too concerned about doing a thing is a recipe for death.
The problems only get more exaggerated as a company grows, as far as the families. It gets more complicated. And as companies go into new markets. I think there's some examples of companies that have done a stellar job in doing both simultaneously and getting professional management in. And let's talk about the most famous company in the world, which is Walmart.
Yes.
If you were to look at that, what worked for Sam Walton and how did he manage to get that vision going?
Well, within the company itself, which we all know, scaled incredibly fast. Went from a couple rural stores to this behemoth. And when companies do that, usually, they outstrip the ability of family members to become business leaders. So Sam understood that right away, and he grew this internal cadre of non-family employees and executives that really, they drank the Kool-Aid. They had the passion. They got the business model. They embodied his values as much as the family did. And he built a system around that talent and then was able to extend all over the U.S. and into other countries. It's a wonderful model. but it's not becoming too family focused in the growth that allowed him to do that. Now the family on the other side also understood their highest and best use, which is being very stable, long-term visionary owners of this dream and supporting good management and building a great board, which really helped with their growth strategy. So the family also professionalized in the sense that it really understood what its mission needed to be.
And that is huge wealth creation, right? The Walton siblings are among the richest in the world. The four of them are on the top 10 list. But
individually,
right. But my question to you is that will that model last? And is there a lesson in that?
In looking at family success over generations, there are three major factors that I track. One is the growth of the assets, then the growth of family talent, because if you're not growing family talent to be able to add value in some appropriate way to the enterprise, the family itself runs out of gas. And then family unity. If the family splits because of ownership splits or divorces or messy conflicts, that too can take a family enterprise down. So you have to manage all three. And the Waltons, for example, I think have done a lovely job at managing all three. And on the growth of asset side, families need to know that families typically grow much faster than their businesses grow. Over generations, they may grow at a quadruple rate. Every couple has 3 to 4 kids. That, the family gets bigger, the base of the family gets bigger, lifestyle expenses go up, the total budget of the family goes up. It's hard for a business to keep up with that. So you better be growing your assets at a pretty substantial rate. We've done a lot of scenario analysis, looking at the growth rates in family assets, typically companies, that just to sustain the growing budget of the family, let alone the growing budget of the enterprise. And we come up with, in many cases, there are of course different scenarios you could look at, but in many cases it's about 6% real growth to sustain the family. Now think about growing your business year over year at a 6% real rate. That's a very, very hard thing to do. So if you, and most families don't do it.
So in a nutshell, is it tougher to be the heir to a family-run business than it is to be a professional CEO who comes to fix a problem in a business?
It's a tough job, at least. Maybe I think it could be a tougher job. The responsibilities, the needs for that heir or heirs to perform well in order to keep this thing going are really pretty substantial. And yet people's expectations are, because they were raised to follow somebody that was very successful, they probably won't be very good or as good. Because they grew up with privilege, let's say, that they're probably lazy and unprepared.
And most often that is also true.
It can be true. Let me say that. I think next generations, well, first of all, next generations are diverse. You may find some people in a family in the second generation that are exactly like that, that are lazy, unprepared, spoiled, etc. But you can also find people that are very hard charging and want to do new things and want to assume the mantle of responsibility and continue to grow what Dad created. So I actually think next generations get an unfair, or let me just say that I think that they're treated unfairly. I think that we don't give them enough credit. That to say, I've seen plenty of examples of next generation members that you wouldn't want as an heir.